Genius, back with you once again. And, you know, over the last year and a half, or almost 2 years now that we've been doing this show, I'll be honest, it's been a pretty one-sided show politically. It's been kind of one-way traffic, if you will. It seems like every week on every one of these shows, I come out here and I go off on the liberals for something, or I go off on the Democrats for something, or I go off on Barack Obama for something. In fact, he's been the main target most of the time. And it's been one-way traffic. It's been pretty partisan, I'll admit it. It's been a very anti-Democrat show for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. And make no mistake, I stand by doing that. I'm proud of that fact. I think in a lot of ways I'm doing a service for the American people by providing that type of show for you at this point in history with what the Democratic Party currently stands for. So yes, I have been a very partisan commentator, no doubt about it, for almost 2 years. But today we're going to break from that tradition just a little bit on America's Evil Genius. We're going to do a different kind of a show. And this is going to be a show where I spend most of the time going off on some Republicans, where I'm not really going to take today's show and go off on Barack Obama too much or go off on the Democrats too much. So, you know, I'm going to take this occasion to let those of you out there who are liberals, those of you out there who are Democrats, who watch this show every week, you know, to get mad or to find out what the other side's thinking, you're going to enjoy this show because you're going to get to see your wet dream at long last. You're going to get to see some Republican infighting. So I know that's not the intent of what I'm doing here, but I know it's what's going to happen. I know you're going to enjoy it. I know you're going to get your jollies off on it. So I'm going to give you guys, you liberals out there, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and go into the kitchen and get you a beer, go get you a sandwich, make you a sandwich, whatever. Come back in, get you a nice easy chair, a nice comfortable office chair at your computer desk there, and sit back, relax, and watch this because you're going to enjoy this. Because today we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk within the Republican Party. And it's going to start right here on this show. Namely, we're going to have a little bit of a come-to-Jesus meeting, if you will, with Majority Leader John Boehner. You see, you undoubtedly have heard over the last week or so about John Boehner taking the lead in this Fiscal Cliff talk, or Fiscal Cliff negotiation, with Barack Obama and the Democrats. And Boehner's made some particularly disgusting comments and made some disgusting moves over the last week or so. He's talked about how he's open to the idea of hiking taxes on the wealthy. Now, granted, he wants to do it a different way than Barack Obama does, but he's still open to the idea. Is that what we've been standing for in the Republican Party for the last 4 years? I think not. But yet he's open to it. He's also threatened to remove conservatives who oppose him from leadership posts. In fact, he did that to Representative Tim Holtzkamp. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Tim Holtzkamp of Kansas. And he's commented that people like us are not team players. Well, Jackass John, I've got a question for you. Just who in the hell's team are you on right now anyway? You see, I know you're doing this for political power. I know you're doing this to win the next election, because that's all you people care about. But what I think you're overlooking is that there's nothing for our team to gain by negotiating with Obama and the Democrats here. You see, no matter what happens in this Fiscal Cliff episode, no matter what happens, the Democrats and the media will place the blame for whatever the situation ends up being at our feet anyway. So no matter how much we negotiate, no matter how much we capitulate, no matter how much we embrace their asinine idea that somehow taxing the wealthy more will somehow avoid this financial cliff when it will not, no matter how much we buy into their idea, when it all goes pear-shaped, they're going to blame us anyway. And they've done this through history. They've done this in the last 50 years. They've done this since the 1960s, time and again. It doesn't matter how many of their ideas we embrace, when push comes to shove, we're still the bad guy. I mean, look at what they did to John McCain. For years, John McCain was the reasonable Republican as far as the media was concerned. Well, he was the nonpartisan guy until he won the party's nomination and ran for president. And then suddenly he was the epitome of all that was evil in their mind. Same thing with Mitt Romney, embracing some of their ideas early in his career. And then when he runs for president, oh, he's this evil ogre. It's illustrative of the fact that no matter how much you kowtow to those idiots, they're never going to accept us. So we need to stop trying. There's nothing to gain by that. And not to mention, the idea of raising taxes on the wealthy, no matter how we do it, will grind the economy to even more of a halt. Think about it. How is it even logical to expect jobs to be created? And that's what we need right now. We need jobs, right? How is it logical to expect jobs to be created when you drastically increase the cost incurred by those who create the jobs? It doesn't make sense. Those cost increases have to be offset in order to justify expanding or investing or hiring. In other words, if you raise the taxes, and you're already doing that through Obamacare anyway, but you raise more taxes on the wealthy, you're going to put them in a position where they have to have so much more profit, so much more productivity to justify hiring people to begin with, that it becomes a losing proposition. And it's much more fiscally responsible to make those investments overseas or even to leave and go there yourselves. You know, for the last couple of years, we've heard all sorts of criticism of the wealthy that they're hoarding their money, they're holding on to their money, they're not expanding, they're not investing in business. Well, why has that happened? It's been because they've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. They knew Obamacare was coming. They were going to see if maybe a change in the election would repeal that. Well, that's not going to happen now. And they're waiting to see if the Bush tax cuts would be made permanent or if they'd be allowed to expire. Well, according to this Fiscal Cliff thing, they will be allowed to expire if that goes through. So this is the other shoe dropping. And they've been holding on to their money in preparation for that. Makes sense. You and I would do the same thing if we were in their position. So the other shoe is about to drop. So how can you increase taxes on them, increase costs on them more, and expect them to invest? You can't. Now, I want to take a detour here real quick. Some of you out there, some of you liberals, and even some of you moderates are jumping up and down and screaming, what about the 1950s? What about the 1950s? We had this huge tax rate on the wealthy in the 1950s and America was still prosperous. Well, let me address that. First of all, there's two things that people overlook when they make that argument. Number one, back then, even though there was a huge tax rate on the wealthy, an ungodly tax rate on them, really, an immoral tax rate on them, there were still a lot more deductions that you could take on your taxes in the 1950s than you can today. So that helped out. But more to the point, number two, the bigger reason was that we were just coming out of World War II. And Europe had been decimated by the war. Their infrastructure in terms of industrialization and factories and that sort of thing and producing goods and services, it was severely hampered. It had not been rebuilt yet. Asia had not yet emerged as an industrial power. Pretty much in the 1950s, we were the only place in the world where industrialization could occur at a large rate. What I'm telling you is that in spite of the immoral tax rates of the 1950s, we were still able to thrive because we had that sort of huge advantage over the rest of the world. We were not prosperous because of the tax rate. We were prosperous in spite of it. We had so much profit coming in and such an extreme advantage over everybody else that we could overcome such a hurdle as that god-awful taxation of the 50s. But today, America does not have that kind of industrial advantage. We can't have that advantage with the technology that exists today. It can't happen. So you can't expect us to have the same results as the 1950s with this. Yeah, we overcame taxation then. There's no way we could do it today. But the bottom line is this. If the Democrats have the votes to raise taxes on the wealthy, after all, they won the presidency, right? And they won some congressional seats. They didn't take the House. They took the Senate. If they have the votes to do this, then we shouldn't give them any cover. That's really all they want. You see, they're trying to hedge their bets because deep down they're worried that raising taxes on the wealthy will grind the economy to a halt, which it will. They think it might. We know it will. And so they want to have that cover of having some Republicans on board for it so that when the next election comes around, they can say, hey, this was bipartisan. Hey, it wasn't just us. I'm telling you, we should not give them that cover. We should force them to own the impending disaster that will happen. After all, such a disaster can't be prevented if tax rates rise on the wealthy. We should make them own this without a single GOP vote, just as we made them own Obamacare. When all the you-know-what hits the fan out of Obamacare, the one thing you can say is that you can't blame us because we warned you about it all along and not a single one of us voted for it. On the other hand, if the Democrats do not have the votes, and I'm not convinced they do right now, at least not in terms of having enough votes to override filibusters and different type of parliamentary tactics like that, then it's even more important that we not negotiate on this point. We should obstruct instead, because that might potentially prevent the disaster. You know, some of you are saying, that's brinksmanship. That's brinksmanship. You're holding the American people hostage. You're playing a game of chicken. Well, I told you last week about a sign that Barry Goldwater had in his plane back when he was campaigning in 1964. Brinksmanship is better than chickenship. And I thoroughly believe that. You know, some people are scared of what will happen with a fiscal cliff, but the way I look at it, and this is going to sound very cruel to say, but if this happens, maybe the American people need to feel a little bit of pain. Remember, A slim majority of the American people voted for Barack Obama for a second term. That tells you that they don't thoroughly understand what they're doing. They don't thoroughly understand the political reality of today. They don't thoroughly understand what's coming down the road. And as I said last week, much like a drug addict, sometimes they've got to hit rock bottom before they'll make a positive change in their life. Maybe that's where the American people are. I know it sounds cruel to say I hope some people go through some trouble and some pain, but maybe that's what it will take to get it through their thick skulls. Because we've tried talking about it for the last 4 years. We've tried arguing about it for the last 4 years and stating our case factually, but the American people have not wanted to listen, at least a slim majority of them. So maybe they need to go through some pain. Maybe a few of them need to starve. Maybe a few of them need to go broke. Maybe a few of them need to be confronted with the harsh reality that is liberalism before they'll abandon it. I know that doesn't sound pleasant, but that's the reality of the situation that we're in. Let me be clear. There must be no negotiation and no capitulation on the point of raising taxes on the wealthy. It must be off the table, period. We do not have a revenue problem in this country. We have a problem of too much government. Not just too much spending, too much government. We must totally rethink the idea of what it is we expect the government to do. We must get out of this mindset of government as charity. The reason we are spending so much money we don't have is because we're funding crap like Social Security and Medicare and education and environmental protection and all kinds of other oversight into businesses and so forth and so on. We don't need it. Our country got along fine for roughly 200 years without it. We're not any better off now that we do all that garbage. But yet John Boehner seems as though he's moving towards that idea of propping up this government we don't need. Here's where the difficult part of the conversation comes in. And this is going to be the part of the conversation that's going to make some of you madder than hell at me, and others of you are going to get enthused by it. So it is what it is. This is my opinion. This is where I'm coming from. I'm sticking to it. Every so often over the last 3 or 4 years, the idea of a third party has come up. The idea that the conservatives break away from the Republicans, the Tea Party breaks away from the Republicans, forms their own political party, and we go from there. Now, if you look back on the last year and a half of this show, you will see that I consistently have said that that should be a last resort. The last resort of all last resorts. I have consistently advocated that we as conservatives would be better off to use the existing infrastructure of the Republican Party to move America to the right and to potentially save it, as long as we have the opportunity to do so within the party. I've always thought that's been the road of least resistance. I've always thought that that would potentially get America moved to the right more quickly than any other method, as long as we have the opportunity to do it. But I must tell you that over the last week, I've really started to rethink that idea. I've really started to rethink if it's even possible to use the infrastructure of the Republican Party to move America to the right and to save this country, when I see the so-called leadership of our party appearing to accept the immoral and dangerous positions on taxation, the same immoral and dangerous positions that the socialists who run the White House have. The Republican leadership is showing right now anyway that they are not standing up for what's right and just. And that's what we and the conservatives have been about all along. And it starts to make you wonder who we're aligned with. I mean, make no mistake, even though this has been a very anti-Democrat program all along, and even though I've been pro-Republican Party in most of these shows, make no mistake, my loyalty is to the United States of America and to the conservative movement. My loyalty is not necessarily to the Republican Party. Personally, I care far more about America being saved than whether an arbitrary number of people with an R after their name are elected to the Congress or the presidency. I, on this show, and many others in different forums, have held nothing back in criticizing Barack Obama and attacking Barack Obama viciously since he's been in office over the last 4 years. And make no mistake, when Obama has taken actions or advocated ideas that undermine the very fabric of this nation, we have been completely justified in viciously attacking him. And I stand by everything I've said about that moron. I'm proud of it. People like you and I have put Barack Obama through hell for the last 4 years, and justifiably so. But we also have to be able to put Republicans through that same sort of hell when they advocate the same sort of ideas and the same sort of asinine principles as the Democrats do. We got to be consistent about this, folks. Yes, we've put Barack Obama through hell. But John Boehner, the way you're going, we got to put you through the same kind of hell. No loyalty. We got to treat you just like we treated him. Jackass John, if you insist on assisting that functioning retard who sits in the White House and sending us all over the fiscal cliff, and make no mistake, that's the end result of raising taxes on the wealthy, then John, you'll do it without our support. And you'll look back when it comes time for the primaries, you'll look back at that team you're talking about, you'll look back at the bench over on your team sidelines, and you won't see anybody there. And you'll look up in the stands of that stadium your team plays at, and you won't see anybody there. You'll prove that you and your moderate wing of the GOP are working against the American people just as much as the socialists in the White House are. Now, if you wish to turn your back on America the way that our president has, then John, you're right. You will not have our support. We will not be team players in that kind of environment. Because frankly, that's a kind of team that I would never want to play for. John, you got something to think about. Moderate Republicans, you got something to think about. Are you going to stand up for what's right? Or are you going to blink at this important moment in history? We're not blinking. That's it for this week. This is America's Evil Genius. We'll see you next time.